And I got really excited, and I said, you know, this is something we should have, and this week is probably a good week for her to do that, because it's our Independence Week, and it maybe is maybe make the value of being an American in America under our Constitution seem more meaningful when we hear her stories. And you're on. You're good.
Did I turn it on? Oh,
Yeah,
it's
it's
outstanding. Well, I have been here before.
Where's the speaker? Where's the electronics in there?
You got one speaker on and one speaker there. You got to stay.
I think you're good. The volume was high. Get in the front row.
Some of you have heard me before? Oh my sakes, you're going to be able to tell this story. Let me start by asking you a question. Where were you on December 7, 1941? Put your hand up if you remember. Oh my sakes, look at that. All right, we'll start with you, Bill. What do you remember? Talk loud.
I was picking holly or cutting holly down by the Jersey Shore, as we traditionally did. Coming over from Pennsylvania, we came over here to get our holly for Christmas decorations.
Okay, and who else did I have a hand up? Okay, stand up and say it really loud.
Real loud?
Yeah?
Real loud.
Real loud.
Real loud.
I was a 1.5-year-old baby and I remember crying.
You can sit down.
Thank you.
Who else? In the back here, sir. Stand up and say it so we can all...
I was sitting on the stoop in front of my house and watching half tracks running down in front of my house from Ardmore, Pennsylvania to 69th Street in Upper Darby to get on a train to go to Philly at the port here.
Did you hear the news?
Yes,
You heard the news that day.
that day.
Who else?
I was in the kitchen when my mother had the radio on, and we had heard the news then. Wow.
It is amazing to me. I have asked this question to audiences all over the place, and people can remember specifically. Now, how long ago was 1941, December 7th?
3 years before I was born.
But you didn't ask, you can tell the story.
We remember that.
And people will tell me I was on the kitchen floor, scrubbing the kitchen floor when it came over the radio. Now, you can, who would remember such a thing as that, where you were? Well, you know what? You remember where you were when John Kennedy was shot, right? And the later children remember when the explosion of our flight to the, I guess, another flight to the moon. Absolutely. But people who were alive and even small children will be able to tell you where they were December 7, 1941. I was 9 years old, a child in China, attending a boarding school with my brothers and sisters. I was a missionary's kid born in China. And we were attending this school to educate the children of missionaries. And our parents were far away across China, continuing with their missionary work. And the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked, the Japanese appeared on the doorstep of our school. And there came a Shinto priest, that's a religion of Japan, to our ball field, and he did some type of a ceremony that said, this school now belonged to the great emperor of Japan. And he went throughout the building and all the quarters, put seals in Japanese writing and glued them to the tables, the chairs, the pianos, the desks, the beds. Everything, I guess, said it in Japanese, that this now belonged to the great emperor of Japan. And it wasn't very long after that we belonged to the emperor of Japan. And we were then prisoners within our own school, had to wear armbands around our arms. If you were American, you had an A on this white armband around your arm. If you were British, you wore a B, and you could not go off the school campus unless you had the armband on. Well, I'm going to cut the story short. that was about for a year, we were prisoners in this, our own school. But then, the Japanese decided they were going to consolidate all these small locations where they had Allied prisoners, because we were now an enemy alien. British, Scandinavian, American, they were all that in the school, but we were all enemy aliens. And that was when we were trucked like animals into the Weishan concentration camp. Now, all of you will know the name of Pearl Buck, the famous Pulitzer Prize winning American author. She herself had lived on the Weishan missionary compound. She was the daughter of Presbyterian missionaries. And this had been a compound that had a school to educate Chinese children and young people, and it had a hospital. And the Japanese had commandeered the camp and turned it into a concentration camp. Now I want to just describe for you, to give a vivid image in your mind of what, we were children. We were children. Our whole school was marched into concentration camp. And I want to give you a picture of what this place was like. It had been a Christian missionary school to educate people and to help people get well. Now people were shipped in, trucked in, bussed in to this place from all over northern China. There were 1,500 prisoners in this place called Weishan. They called it a civilian assembly center. That was their polite name for it, the Weishan Civilian Assembly Center. And there we were in this place. Now they had put electrified wires around the barrier wall. They patrolled with, in those days we called them Alsatians. I think these days in America we call them German Shepherds. They patrolled with dogs. We all had to wear now a small prisoner number. Now we were never tattooed with prisoner numbers. We had to wear a prisoner number that told what part of the concentration camp we were located in and what our prisoner number was in that location. And there we were, hungry, because the food was certainly extremely inadequate, patrolled by dogs, guards, bayonet drills. We children, this was really fascinating. We called it yaw practice. They would be there, they would bulk up with, I guess, heavy kind of padding of some kind, and one and another would face each other, and they would hold actually a bayonet that's got a sharp knife on the end. I guess you all know about bayonets. Many of you probably have held bayonets. And they had some kind of protection over the head, and they would charge at each other, and when they charged, they would say, "Yeah!" and they would scream. So we called it yaw practice, and we would stand there as children just watching yaw practice. I was 9 years old, and this was the world we found ourselves in. Now, part of this story is some very, very important lessons. First off, I want to tell about my parents. My parents were God-fearing missionaries. My dad, third-generation missionaries to China. And they knew stuff was going to come down. The Japanese had been around for a long time in China before they attacked the United States. So we knew about gunboats, and we knew about the Japanese fighting the guerrillas in the hills behind our school. And my mother said, "How do you anchor children for whatever comes?" And she said, there's a school teacher, or she was from a school teacher, grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. and she said, "You pour God's promises into their hearts." So she said, the best way to do that is to put it to music. She said, "You know, a child can sing 'Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb' when they're 3 years old, and when they're 93, they can still sing 'Mary had a little lamb.'" So she put Psalm 91 to music, that beautiful, beautiful psalm. Talks about God's protection, and all the Taylor choir. There were 4 of us children in this concentration camp, by the way, but this was before the war broke out for America. She had us singing. she had one of those old pump organs where you had to pump your feet to make the music come out. And most of you heard of those, most young people never heard of such a thing these days. And she would play the pump organ. She had put the psalm to music, and the little Taylor choir after breakfast every day would gather around the pump organ for what we called our family worship. And we would sing from Psalm 91. We would get to that verse. And he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you. I want you to remember that verse. And he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you. When we got into this concentration camp, now mind you, our whole school was marched in. Most of the children were there without parents. Our teachers and the children were all marched into this school. So here we were in this place, and the teachers said, it's kind of the same message. How do you anchor children for this kind of situation? Well, they said, number one, school will go on. You've got to be kidding. School in a concentration camp is go on? How could that be? There weren't any desks. Let me tell you something. When you get marched into concentration camps, you're singing from the Psalms, and we were, when the Japanese marched us, we were singing, God is our refuge, Psalm 46, our refuge and our strength. And then it goes, it said, therefore we will not be afraid. So we get into this camp, and the teachers say, school will go on. Now you have no desks, no chairs, but our teachers would look at the girls who were complaining and thinking, well, now why are we going to have to go to school? Because the teacher said, and listen to this message, we will win this war, and when we do, you will have to be going to school to compete with other boys and girls who have been going to school. Do you hear the message of hope pouring into the church? How important the message is you as a grown-up, now probably grandparents, pour into your grandchildren. Those stick forever. And the teacher said, not only that, bless my soul, and there will be the same nice manners. And you're saying, what? You are marching into, well, they called it a kitchen. It was like a big dining room with wooden tables and wooden benches, and you might be carrying a soap dish or a empty tin can, because you sure are bringing China into a concentration camp, and they could be pouring in some kind of glop like boiled animal grain, they call galliang in China. In America, I think it's called broomcorn or sorghum. And it's a rough kind of grain that they feed to their animals. And you could be eating this out of a tin can or out of a soap dish. And here would come the teacher, Mary Taylor. That was my name as a child. Mary Taylor, put your back up straight. Do not slouch while you're eating. Do not talk while you have food in your mouth. Really? And then it would be something like this. There are not two sets of manners, one set of manners for the Weishan concentration camp, and another set of manners for the princesses in Buckingham Palace. And that was, of course, Queen Elizabeth now, but she was Princess Elizabeth then, and her sister Margaret Rose. So we were to have manners as nice as the princesses in Buckingham Palace. But you know what? That kind of message that you don't drop your standards when you get in a place like this, that is a powerful message. And they said, not only that, we will have daily clean and tidy inspections, not just your dormitory room, because you were sleeping on not on the floor. You did not want to sleep on the floor. There were rats. So you wanted to sleep on steamer trunks, 3 steamer trunks together, and you would put a quilt on top, and that's where you would sleep. And they would come around with an inspection to see, were you clean, were you neat, did you have your mending done, inspecting the children themselves, and then inspecting to see had the floors been scrubbed. The standards were going to be high. And then they said, we will make games out of tough stuff. Well, they didn't say it that way. Well, the tough stuff was things like bed bugs, rats, flies, coal dust instead of coal to heat the room, And they said, we will make games out of these. I don't remember those things as tough stuff. I remember as, hey, that was pretty neat what we did. Like, my little brother John, who is a surgeon in Ohio today, he's the one that won the prize when the teachers set up the big competition of the fly killing competition. I don't know how they got, every child was given a little jar and a fly swat. Don't ask me where they came by those. And they had to count them, but my little brother John won the prize for winning, I think it was more than 2,000 flies that he killed, and he won some kind of little can of pate of some kind. I think it came with a Red Cross distribution of food at some time. Then they said, okay, well, we have rats. Well, then let's make that into a contest. Let's see which group of school children in the camp can get the most rats. Well, our school won the most because our boys, I don't know, they drowned rats, they got them in the fire, I don't know how they found them, but our school got more rats than anybody else did, so we won that particular prize. And I'm telling you a happy story of children in a concentration camp killing rats. The doctors in the place would have said, well, that was a sanitation issue. Well, it was, hey, a big contest for us. Then there were the bed bugs, the Battle of the Bed Bugs. Oh, that's going to be called the Battle of the Bed Bugs. Every Saturday we had a Battle of the Bed Bugs. Bed bugs were every place. They got in every crack and cranny. If you had slept on a 3 steamer trunks, guaranteed the bed bugs would have laid eggs in every crack and cranny in your steamer trunk, which is like a giant suitcase, usually with a lot of metal in it. And so on Saturdays in the summertime when the heat was there and the bugs would come, if you had a knife, and most people didn't have a knife, or your thumbnail, you'd go through every crack and cranny you could to kill the bed bugs, because if you didn't get them, they would get you. And at night, they always would get you at night. All these kinds of things. Well, the Japanese would not issue coal when it was cold. They just set a particular time. This is when we're going to issue this stuff, and whether it was cold or hot, but it was usually going to be way into it was already cold. And there was one hot pot-belly stove in the middle of the dormitory room where I was living with 13 girls my age from our school. And they said, you have to go to the Japanese quarters and get the coal dust. Well, that was really, really heavy, so we would have buckets. So we girls made a game of it. And we did girl, bucket, make a long line. We go into the Japanese quarters and somebody would shovel this coal dust into our buckets, and we would come back singing, many hands make light work, many hands make light work, carrying the buckets of coal back to the camp. But that wasn't the tough part. You had to mix the coal dust in with dirt and water in order to get them into coal balls, and then you sat them out in the sun till they baked, and that was your substitute for coal. Well, you know what? You know what I'm telling you here? Mary Taylor here and Marjorie Harrison, my team, the two of us, we won the prize in that concentration camp dormitory of being able to get that pot-belly stove red hot more times than anybody else. Now you're standing in astonishment. How could this be? Because our teachers insisted on holding high standards and hope. And they were not going to let people give up their hope. Now let me tell you the other story. 40 years after the war, I was asked by the Philadelphia Inquirer to write an article that was the cover story of the Philadelphia Inquirer magazine in August of 1985, 40 years after the ending of the war and our liberation. I went to England to visit some of the teachers, because I ended up being a grown-up, and for part of my career I was a teacher. And I said to the principal of the elementary school, Miss Carr, I said, Miss Carr, what were you feeling in this place? You were working with kids away from their parents, and let me tell you, we didn't see our parents for 5.5 years. 5.5 years. What were you feeling? she said, I would pray to God every night that when they lined us up by the death trenches, and there was one outside the camp, and they started shooting us, that God would let me be one of the first, that I didn't have to see it. I said, Miss Carr, I have no idea. Well, you see, the grown-ups knew all about the rape of Nanking, what the Japanese had done to women and children and innocent people, civilians. They all knew about that. They knew what the Japanese could do. So the teachers were giving us these messages, and they were making us learn Bible verses every single day. I can assure you of that. That was part of our schoolwork. We memorized Bible verses. And she said, I just wanted me to be first. Well, actually, the trenches outside, as it turns out, were not death trenches. They were trenches to try the Japanese trying to stop the black market over the wall, where people were, when the guards weren't around, people were swapping whatever they had of any value for food. Now, the teachers in the camp were very alarmed about the poor nutrition for children. So they put out the word. Well, the doctors, I think, in the camp, that were prisoner doctors, put the word out. Anybody that has successfully swapped for eggs, save the eggshells for the children. When you finished eating the eggs, save the eggshells. And the teachers would scrub the eggshells. There weren't eggshells all the time, believe me. And then they made them, they baked them, and then ground them into powder, and then would put calcium, pure calcium, right? Eggshells, pure calcium, right on our tongue. Line us up to have us going, whatever, with something going into our tummies that was going to put calcium in our bones and in our teeth, because you had babies coming in and not proper enamel, and you had girls coming the time of their menses and not having menstrual periods because the nutrition was so poor. Well, this was the way things went on through the camp. But the teachers kept on with things like Girl Scouts. Well, they didn't call it Girl Scouts. The British called them girl. These were British teachers. Girl Guides and Brownies. And we were Brownies and Girl Guides. I was in Crow's Woods this very morning. Bless my soul. I was winding some twine. I said, oh yeah, this is a round turn 2/2 hitches. We learned, I guess it was for probably a brownie prize or a badge or something of that kind. And here we were, oh, I can't, what? You had Girl Guides and Boy Scouts and Brownies and Cub Scouts? Yes, we did. And let me tell you, I still remember the song we ended at the end of our Girl Scout meeting. It would be, day is done, gone the sun, from the sea, from the hills, from the sky, all is well, safely rest. God is not. We made songs out about everything. Well, you know what? By the end of the period of time, it was getting very discouraging. There were men that had lost more than 100 pounds. The food was abominable, and it was getting worse as the war moved on. By the way, some of you would be interested to know that the famous Olympic athlete, Eric Liddell, who was made famous by the movie Chariots of Fire more than 20 years ago, he died in our camp. He was rounded up from the northern China, and he died in the Weishan concentration camp. But anyway, people were getting very, very discouraged. Poor nutrition, poor hope. The Japanese were giving us less and less, and there were people that felt they did not think they could possibly get any worse, that they could last much longer, certainly not another winter coming through. I remember August 17, 1945, I had upset stomach. It was not uncommon to have upset stomach because sanitation was really bad in this place. And I was lying on the steamer trunks that August day, and I thought I heard an airplane I said, no, that cannot be an airplane. I'm lying on the steamer trunks. The other children were getting ready to go to school, which could be sitting out under the trees or in the church. There was a church on this compound. And I listened and I thought, it cannot be an airplane. And I jumped off the steamer trunks and looked out the window, and out the window here was flying low, low, low. It was American plane, an American plane, the blue American star on the underside of that plane. And it was instant cure for my diarrhea. I ran for the gates. I ran. I said, out of 1,500 prisoners, I will be the first one there at the gates, whoever this is, because while I was watching, people began dropping out of the belly of this plane into the fields beyond the barrier wall. I dashed out to the gates of the camp. The entire camp had gone berserk. Everybody screaming, crying, dancing, waving shirts because the plane kept going around and nobody knew whether it was going to go away, kept going around, and it was 7 men parachuting at about 400 feet out into the fields beyond the camp. Let me tell you something. Somebody asked me the other day, do you remember that? Can I say this to you? That is probably one of the biggest days of my life. You never forget such a thing as that. I was 12 years old that day, 12 years old. And here the people went, they're crying, screaming, waving their shirts up into the sky, and they ran out, and the Japanese must have known the war was over because they did not shoot when everybody began running outside the gate out into the fields to greet these American heroes. It turned out it was 6 Americans and 1 young Chinese interpreter, a young fellow who was just a young Chinese kid who was just a college student. He was the youngest man on the team because in case some tragedy fell with the plane, they needed to have someone who could speak Chinese in the fields wherever they were. Well, we went out there, oh my sakes, I have to go back a little bit. We had anticipated this day. Well, I'll tell you who did it, the Salvation Army Band. The Salvation were missionaries that had been in prison there. And they kept saying it, we will win the war, and when we do, we need to have a victory medley. Can you even imagine this message just going over and over? The messages of hope. You're going to win the war, and you'll have to compete with other boys and girls. And then you have the Salvation Army Band. We're going to win the war. Let's have a victory medley for whoever comes. We'll be able to play their national anthem. Well, they said the Salvation Army. Well, who will liberate us? Oh, well, it could be China. It could be England. It could be Russia. Now, what have I left out? Russia. Well, anyway, four nationalities. Oh, American, England, Russia, China. It could be any of those that could liberate us. So let's put all those 4 national anthems together and practice the victory medley. We'll put some hymns of the faith in there. They weren't allowed to play national anthems, but they could play. They were good musicians. They brought their instruments into the camp. And they would play the melody. They wouldn't play the melody. They would just play the harmony. But put some hymns in, like Onward Christian Soldiers or Rise Up, O Men of God, and put this all together. And they practiced outside the Japanese commandant's office every Tuesday night, the victory medley for whoever came to rescue us. Well, the people of the camp just rushed out and picked up these Americans, and this Chinese interpreter began carrying them back to the gates of the camp. And when they got to the gates of the camp, there on a mound by the gate, the Salvation Army was playing the victory medley. And when they got to that place, oh say, does that star-spangled banner still wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave? The sergeant, the Major Stanley Steiger, who led this mission, he slithered down from the shoulders where they'd been carried on the puny shoulders by prisoners to carry them to the gate. He slithered down to a standing salute, and an American boy who was a trombonist in the Salvation Army Band, he just crumpled to the ground and began to cry. As we knew we were free. We were all free. You don't even know what it feels like unless you have felt this. We were free. The Americans took over the camp. There was no fight. The Japanese did not fight them off. And the Americans, Major Steiger, said, you are responsible. You are going to keep your weapons. The Japanese headman, must have been some ceremony, was handing over his weapon to Major Steiger. He said, no, you are keeping those weapons, and until further Americans come here, you will keep this place safe, because there were guerrillas and all kinds of war stuff going on, silliness going on in China. The communists fighting the nationalists instead of fighting the Japanese in China. Well, we began to dream of liberation, and to cut the story short, I was reunited in this wonderful picture here. 9/11, 1945, after 5.5 years, we were reunited with our parents. This is my mom, my dad, me, Jamie, Kathleen, Johnny, and little brother. Guess what? We got home and found out we had a little brother we'd never seen yet. He was nearly 5 years old when we got there. He didn't like that at all when we were calling them Daddy and Mommy. He thought Daddy and Mommy were just his. He didn't understand that brothers shared daddies and mommies. So here we were reunited with our family in 9/11, 1945. You know something? I wondered a lot. Oh, we thought they were gods. We cut off pieces of their hair. We got their autographs. People like my sister, who was a teenager, they got neat stuff like insignia. We little kids got boring stuff like buttons. And they gave us pieces of parachute, all these kinds of things. We were in love with them. We wanted to sit on their laps. We children, 12 years old, I wanted to sit on their lap and have them sing, please sing us the songs of America. What are the popular songs? What do Americans like to hear? And Major Steiger taught us, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy. You know that famous song, don't you? Well, that was apparently a popular song before these men had gone overseas. You know, through the years, I just said, who in the world were these people that would jump out of a plane at 400 feet to liberate 1,500 Allied prisoners? They didn't know whether they'd be shot at. Who were the people? In 1997, at the time, I was running for the state legislature. Many of you heard the name of Louis Greenwald and John Adler. I was to be their partner in running for the state legislature. And in 1997, I said, you know what? I have got to find the heroes that liberated the camp. How would you do that? I was clueless. I mean, I was a child when this happened. How would you go about? Would you go to Japan? Would you go to the Pentagon? We had their names. Almost everyone got their autographs, pieces of their hair. I did not know. I started to look at this, and John Adler said, Mary, I need you to be substitute for me on Saturday night. There is a reunion of old timers in one of the hotels on Route 73 in Mount Laurel. And the group is the China, Burma, India Veterans Association. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you one important part of the story. Name of the airplane? The Armored Angel. He shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. And the airplane was called the Armored Angel. John said, you substitute for me Saturday night. I can't go to this event. It's a reunion of the China, Burma, India Veterans Association. I never heard of this group before. I said, China, Burma, India. Veterans? Maybe, oh my sakes, that could be my heroes. Maybe some of my heroes could be at that banquet. So I got all my precious things out and looked at them and got their names and addresses and looked at them, and I said, I'm going to take these list of names and go to that banquet. And John Adler said to me, Senator Adler, he said, and Mary, give them this proclamation, which is a proclamation from the New Jersey legislature thanking them for their service to America during World War II. So I took the proclamation when it was my turn in front of the microphone, I said, I know it was not an accident that Senator Adler asked me to come here today to meet with you. And I told them briefly the story of Liberation Day, this B-24, the armored angel, flying low over 1,500 prisoners in a Japanese concentration camp. And I said, I have their names. And I took my list out, and I read the names into the microphone, and I said, is any one of my heroes in this room? And there were people crying, but they were quiet. But after that meeting, I was just absolutely enveloped with love by those men and women, because there were some women who were like nurses in the war, and of course the wives were there too. They wanted to give me little presents as though I was a hero. I was looking for my heroes. I was not the hero. Oh my sakes, definitely not. And that one man took my list from the state of Maryland. He said, I'm going to take this list. A few days later, here came a big brown envelope in the mail with pages of hundreds of names. Don't ask me how he did it or what. Maybe it was some kind of internet stuff, and I'm not good at any of that stuff. He knew how to do this. Every name in the United States that matched the names of the heroes that I had given them. I had given him my list of heroes. So I said, oh my sakes, how am I going to do this? I'm going door to door knocking on doors to get elected to the New Jersey General Assembly. How am I going to do this? And I thought, you know what? Maybe I could even I could maybe put letters in an envelope to these addresses, name, address, and phone number. I'm a little cheap, didn't have to phone them, so maybe if I'll just put a postage stamp and say, are you the James Hannon that liberated the Waishien concentration camp August 17, 1945, and then please return, and I put an envelope in with my name and address and a stamp, and I began getting these letters back. And they all were, well, God bless you, Mary, I hope you find your heroes, but I'm not the one. And finally, one day, a telephone call. By the way, the men had told me, write an article for our news magazine. Say that you're looking for these heroes, put their names down. So sure enough, the magazine wrote an article, it named the heroes, and put my name and address and phone number. Well, here I get a call from a lady in Moorestown, New Jersey. Moorestown, New Jersey. She said, I was a nurse in Burma during the war. I see you're looking for Raymond Hanshelak. She said, my sister lives next door to Mr. Hanshelak in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. Oh my sakes, I could not believe it. She said, I will arrange to have them come down here. Oh, when I called on the telephone to speak to the lady, I said, I am calling for Raymond Hanshelak. Mr. Hanshelak was the medic. You know what medics are on these missions. He was the medic. And she said, and what is the purpose of this phone call? When I told her, she just gasped. She said, I never heard of any of this. She said, my Raymond died a year ago. She said, we met after the war. And he never told me this. And that was characteristic by man after man after man. They never talked about it. She said, my husband was trained in secrecy. He ended up being in the CIA and was serving even in Vietnam. And she said, he never told me anything about it. Here is a widow begging me, a child in this concentration camp, to tell about her hero husband, that she didn't know anything about that. Well, you know what? I thought that is really, really, really bad news to my heart, because I might just be finding widows now. This was 1997. So I got off my list. There was only one Peter Orlick the youngest of the team, the youngest American on the team, Peter Orlick. His name is very unusual. It ends with a CH, not a K. So there was only one Peter Orlick in the Queens, New York. So I chose to phone on Sunday nights because I had MCI's cheap rates on Sunday nights. So I phoned and I said, I'm calling for Peter Orlick. And it was the same thing again, a widow. And she said, Mary, I'm going to send you something. She said, my Pete had a piece of parachute given him by a girl in the camp. We don't know who, but he fell in love with a girl in the camp in all of 3 weeks, and the girl was 15 for pity's sakes. But that's it, young men that hadn't seen American girls for how long. And she said, she must have embroidered and given him this piece of parachute about this big and this wide, real silk, beige, about just beige, tan, about the color of these beige shirts here. But embroidered, it has the airplane over here, and it has the date, August 17, 1945, and all the men dropping in parachute, and they autographed it. And down at the bottom was the church steeple in the concentration camp. She said, I'm going to send this to you because it's just sitting in the drawer and nobody gets to see it or anything, and I'm going to send it to you. Let me tell you something. That has been one of my most treasured possessions. I loaned it for over 10 years to the Smithsonian Institute because I thought all of America needs to hear about our heroes. And I said, you can keep it there. They had a huge, they still have, it's an ongoing forever, I guess, display called The Price of Freedom, America's Wars. And they had this piece of parachute in a small section of it with memorabilia from the Weishin concentration camp. Well, now I had found 2 widows, and I said, oh my, this is all I'm going to find. Not that I was ungrateful to find widows. I most certainly was not ungrateful. And I said, okay, go down my list. Kept sending letters out. Go down my list. And I said, okay, here's a Tad DeGackie in Alliance, Nebraska. So on a Sunday night, I phoned, and I said, I'm calling for Tad DeGackie, and he said, speaking. And I started to cry because I had found my first hero. He was the Japanese American interpreter, Japanese interpreter. But this whole group of men, except for the Chinese and one other person, were in the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which was the forerunner of the CIA. And now I'm talking to this man who's a hero, and who is he? He's a farm boy. He came back and became a farmer the way his parents were in Alliance, Nebraska, farming corn and beans. I was just dumbfounded. And I said, Mr. McGackie, he said, call me Tad. I said, okay, well, Tad, what did it feel like when all of us children were following you around? We loved him because he was a superstar athlete. And so all the kids really, really loved him because when they teamed up the Americans with the British, he helped the Americans win. That was really, really good because he'd been a superstar hero in his high school class out there in Nebraska. Had been in football and baseball and track. So he could play all this kind of stuff. So the kids just followed him around like we were just stuck to him, like we're never going to let him out of our sights. And I just talked with him for about an hour. And I said, well, you were a hero. He says, I'm not a hero. We called them all angels. We called them angels. Angels. Falling out of the sky for us. Angels. He said, oh, I can help you find Jimmy Moore. Do you know, I nearly fainted. I had 150 James Moores on my list to call. And I thought, how am I going to find Jimmy Moore? Oh, he said, we kept friends through the years and sending birthday cards and Christmas cards and kept in touch. He says, you can find him in Dallas, Texas. Unbelievable. So I call up Jimmy Moore, and he says to me, Mary, I'm a graduate of the Chifu School for the Children of Missionaries, the same school that I was in. How could that be? If I tell you that story, if they made a movie of it, you'd say, that's stupid. That could not be, somebody made that up. That could not be true. Jimmy Moore said, yeah. He said, I was in the FBI at the time he came. He said, I graduated in about 1936, came to the United States, graduated, and joined the FBI. And he said, I didn't have to go to war because J. Edgar Hoover said people in the FBI were already doing service to America. But he said, I wanted to go because our school literature told about all my classmates were going to war, and some of them were even being killed. He said, my wife didn't want me to go because I already had 2 children. But he said, I needed to go. And he said, I resigned from the FBI and the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which they were spies, that's what they were spies, were going to send people to China, and were looking for people who could speak Chinese. So Jimmy Moore said, I had it in my mind that I was going to try to liberate the concentration camp where all my classmates and my teachers were. I could not believe it. That was just unbelievable. Jimmy Moore, unbelievable. And now, get this gentleman. He's a spy, so he said, I can help you, Mary. It wasn't very long, I'm sitting at my desk at work, and he said, Mary, I found Major Steiger for you. This is the man that headed the mission. He says, I found him in Reno, Nevada today. I think he said he did some kind of a search of every driver's license in the United States or something. And so, whatever it was, spies, I guess, I had a spy helping me find this thing. So here I found Major Steiger. So I got him on the phone, and if that wasn't unbelievable, retired now, obviously, he was approaching his 80s. And I just talked with him, and he said, I don't know if I'm going to walk again. I just fell and broke my hip. I said, Major Steiger, anybody that had the spizzerinctum to jump out of a plane at 400 feet and liberate 1,500 prisoners, I guarantee you are going to walk again. So here was this child, me, from that he had liberated, now telling him definitely he was going to walk again, and I was right. Well, then it was by the end of the year, Jimmy Moore called me again, and he said, I found the last one, Jim Hammond in Yucca Valley, California. I said, oh my sakes, unbelievable. Pennsylvania, New York, Nebraska, Reno, Nevada, Jimmy Moore, Dallas, Texas. Oh my sakes, all these different people, all parts of America. I said, you know, it's not enough. Oh, I made a fuss. I'm a fusser. I'm a fusser. I made a fuss around the world. We had a network of ex-prisoners. I said, here are our heroes. This is their name. This is their address. This is their phone number. Send them Christmas cards. Send them their birthday cards. Call them and say hello. Tell them what you remember of what they did. And you know, there's not one of them that said that he was a hero. I decided Mary was going to crisscross America, my private pilgrimage, to say thank you to each one face to face. And I did that. The first one was Helen Hanshelak, the first widow I found. The lady from Moorestown, New Jersey, arranged to have her drive down and stay with her. And when I spoke at some kind of a social club in Cherry Hill, and I told this story to Helen Hanshelak and the social club that was there, and honored the memory of her husband. I took the train, took the train through New York City up onto Long Island to the Long Island chapter of the China-Burma Indian Veterans Association, and spoke to that group and honored the memory of Peter Orlick in the presence of his sister, his widow, and his granddaughter. Spoke there. And then it took me 2 years to do this, to crisscross the country. I went to Jimmy Moore's. Oh, that was beautiful. I loved that. Being a preacher's kid, and he was a preacher's kid, so we had a lot in common there, because he was a missionary's kid and I'm a missionary's kid. And I arranged with the pastor of his church. I found out who his church is in Dallas, Texas. I said, preacher, I would like to speak on Sunday morning and tell a story, an inspirational story. Well, the preacher was very happy about that. And so there I was, and his wife, Jimmy Moore's wife, was really smart. She got a tape recorder, and she said, Mary, put this on the platform. When you get up to tell this story, just push the button, and that will record. And then my children will have a record of this. And I told the story of this hero, unbelievable. I will never forget that morning. I never forget. When the service was over, Jimmy was seated on the front seat, and his wife, and I think one of his children. The children had no idea about any of this. No one in that church had any idea that they had been worshiping God in that church for years and years together with an American hero, and they didn't even know it. I remember one young lady just could not stop crying, just wept and wept and wept. Well, it was so beautiful. I was very fortunate in some respects, because I often am asked to speak different places, and I was asked to speak at a conference, a national conference in California. So I just took my route through Reno, Nevada, and it happened to be there to be able to go to visit Stanley Steiger on his 81st birthday. And then I was able to fly out to Tadnagaki. I was speaking in Nebraska to youth groups there. And I went and visited Tadnagaki. And I said, I want you to take me to all the places that you, a Japanese American, went to school. He didn't even speak English till he went to elementary school, because his father and mother were first generations coming to the United States as actually father to work on the railroad. And they landed there in Nebraska and started farming. And I said, I want you to show me the school. I want you to show me where your farm is. One of the best pictures I ever took, I wish I was good at blowing things up so you could see them, was him with the windmill on his farm. Oh my sakes, I love that picture. You know what was beautiful about that? 2 or 3 years later, after I visited him, his grandsons asked me to come and be at his 90th birthday celebrations throughout the town. I said, one condition. Yes, I will come and I will speak, but you have to let me tell the story of this bashful man, because he had never let me make a fuss about him in the town. Never. He was so bashful. He was the Japanese interpreter on that mission. So then I went out and visited Jim Hannon in Yucca Valley, California. I wanted to be able to speak publicly. I did speak at the veterans group there, but at other occasions I had the opportunity to speak at the China-Burma, India, once in Texas and once in Valley Forge, to honor these people. But you know what? I was missing one. The Chinese interpreter, Eddie Wong. Oh my sakes. To let you pass this around. This was just a young college student. He hadn't even graduated from high school when he was on that rescue mission. I said, I searched, I tried, I really tried. How would I find Eddie Wong? I had no idea. I asked veterans groups. I even saw a name, Edward Wong, a byline in the New York Times. And I wrote to this person and I said, are you any relative of the Eddie Wong that liberated the Weishan concentration camp? He's a reporter for the New York Times. No, I don't know anything about that. So that was, I couldn't find anything. But all across the internet, there's a Weishan website. Pass it over this way. Oh, the Weishan website. I was asked to write an article that told about how I found my World War II heroes. And at the bottom of it said, I am still looking for Eddie Wong. I was sitting at my computer 2 years ago, in March. I saw this email. And this person said, my name is Daniel Wong. I am the grandson of Eddie Wong, who liberated the Weishan concentration camp in 1945. I was dumbfounded. I thought it must be a hoax, because my name was so much in the Weishan story on the internet. And I said to my daughter, who's a lawyer and also lives in town, so she's good about asking questions, I said, Alice, what do you think if I would write questions to Mr. Wong? She said, I think it would be okay, but I asked my Chinese friends, I said, what do you think, would be okay for me to write a whole lot of questions to Mr. Wong, so I'll know whether he's for real or not? And they said, well, maybe 3 questions. Oh, I said, well, I have 16 questions. And so I asked Mr. Wong's grandson, this man, he's in the United States on a teaching visa or something like that in South Carolina. I said, Dan, would your grandfather mind if I asked him some questions? I didn't know if Mr. Wong still speaks English even. He said, I'll ask my grandfather. And he came back, shortly there. No, my grandfather would like to answer questions. When I got the answers in only a couple days, I said, he's for real, and my daughter said, good for you, Mom, you found your last hero, he's for real. And then my Chinese friend said, we'll help you set up talking to him. You come to our house, and we have a speaker phone, and we'll set it up so Mr. Wong will be at 9 o'clock at night, and you'll be at 9 o'clock New Jersey, which is exactly the opposite end of the clock. And she said, you can talk to him. So I got to their house, I'm walking around their living room, I'm walking around their living room. I said, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry. And at 9 o'clock the phone rang, and it's Mr. Wong. I didn't cry. I said, Mr. Wong, I just have one question for you. Will you tell me your story? And he began talking and talking and talking. And then I said, well, after he was telling about his story, I said, what did you like? Was there anything you liked? He said, I liked everything. He said, I was just a young college student. I liked everything. He said, one of the girls, she taught me how to dance. Her name was Betty Lambert. I nearly fell out of my chair. Betty Lambert was a girl in the camp for sure. And she had given him, no, not she, another of the girls had given him a piece of parachute similar to the one that I have. Oh, bless my soul, I just did not know. Then last year, I was invited to speak at the Veterans Day, and our middle school has the incredible Veterans Day, honoring America's heroes. And they invited me to speak, and I said to the kids at the end of my speech, after I told them all about the heroes, and the teacher had put their pictures up on the screen so everybody could see what the heroes looked like. I said, I'm telling you a secret. I'm thinking of going to China to visit Mr. Wong. The kids all wrote me letters after I spoke at the middle school. And they said, we hope you find Mr. Wong and you come and tell us about it. Last year I went to China and I visited Mr. Wong. I wouldn't go at my age by myself. That was too scary. I used to travel a lot, but not anymore. But I went to China. My nephew lives in Hong Kong and speaks every Chinese fluently, and he said, Aunt Mary, I'll be your escort. I went off the charts with Mr. Wong. He is 93 years old now. We keep nice friendship. We don't talk. We send emails back and forth. And that's a picture of me where we were hounded by the press. The story went viral. Somebody told me it was broadcast on Shanghai subway, for pity's sakes. We acted like two children. I was hugging this man, I was kissing him, we were holding hands, And all these newspapers and reporting and things, they said, they were acting like children, giggling and laughing and holding hands, and you know what? I had gone there planning to be so dignified and proper. But you know, there wasn't a dignified and proper bone in me when I saw this man. That is unbelievable. You know what? There are still people that will tell you America has no heroes. But I'm saying to you, I know their names. Now, I have time for some questions. So if you have some questions that you'd like to ask while we're passing the picture, I'd like to see.
What language was spoken in the camp?
English.
Did you make efforts to learn other languages?
Yes, there were some that tried to learn other languages. I can remember there was one girl student in our school for the children of missionaries that she teamed up to learn French from one of the Roman Catholic priests that was a prisoner in the camp, but I think he must have come from France. And there were those kinds, but there was no formal, nobody set up classes where you were teaching. One of the classes that we had to, in our school, we had to learn Latin, so we continued learning Latin. That left me real fast when we got home.
I know what you
Did they
mean.
make a movie about this years ago, or based on your experience, Empire of the Sun?
The movie was made called Chariots of Fire several years ago. It did not tell. It told about Eric Liddell and the 1924 Olympics and how he won the Olympics, and then after he won the Olympics, he went to China as a missionary. There was only the tiniest little paragraph at the end, at the very, very end of that movie. It said, Eric Liddell died in the Weishan concentration camp in 1944.
I'm wondering about the Japanese soldiers and their treatment of all of the people there. You would think over time, I wouldn't say friendships, but you would think over time that there would be some sort of relationships built, human to human.
The Japanese in our camp, from anything that we have been able to hear, we were treated better than in many, many others. There were prisoners in Japan. There were many prisoner camps in the Philippines. We were, of course, there were a lot of these concentration camps, a number of them in China itself. And to the best of our knowledge, we were treated better than most. We children, of course, remember, and I was a young child, we were very protected by our teachers. They had one message in their head about being afraid of tumbling into the death pit, being shot into the death pit. And they were telling us every day God was going to take care of us. And why would what? My daddy and my mommy said, He shall give His angels charge over you. Well, my daddy and mommy would never tell me a lie. And the teachers would never tell us a lie. So why would I not believe that? Of course, some of our older brothers and sisters, they were smart enough to intermingle more with other people in the camp and get a much different picture. The story that I've told you is Mary's story. Every person has his or her own story of the camp. But, yes, we kids would go up to the Japanese guards that were regularly in the pillbox near the dormitory where we were, and we would just be pitiful, or we would try to talk a little. We could speak Chinese, and they could speak a little Chinese. And we would, oh, pitiful, our ball went over the wall. So he would pull us up, drop us over the wall, and we would play for 5 to 10 minutes, and then he'd pull us, we'd get the ball, pull us back, he'd put us in. Bless my soul, when the teachers heard about that, they put that to stop so fast you could not even believe it. But the Japanese would sometimes show us pictures of their children. They're very fond of children. And, but there were some people that did not have an easy time. But I've heard people tell, no one was killed in the camp. There were certain people that died in the camp, but it was like malnutrition or just diseases, because there was very, very poor and medical care. Just whatever the prisoners of the camp could do, that was all that would be the medical care that was available.
Where did you learn to be such an eloquent speaker?
I had a brilliant father speaker and a brilliant mother speaker who both were marvelous storytellers. Did you like it?
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
How much we appreciate your coming here. You are an inspiration to us, and we're delighted.
Well, I hope the message is, let us honor our heroes. They have earned every bit of it. And I'm sure there are heroes in this room.
I think I'm looking at one.
No, I'm not a hero. Definitely not.
You are. Here's a pen, token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
But,
Thank
you
you,
know,
thank
we're there to
you.
support
Well,
you.
you are a superstar audience, I'm telling you. That is lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. But I definitely want to have back my pictures of Mr. Wong and Mr. Eddie Wong.
There it is, the picture.
But one piece of the story I didn't tell you. Mr. Wong would not let me tell it until very recently, because he said, you cannot tell this part of my story. The communists got him for being a friend of Americans. And he was in prison, sometime in solitary confinement, for 3 years during the Cultural Revolution. And he said, you can't tell that. And I'm not, well, I was not going to argue with him. If he said I couldn't, I was not going to tell it. But recently, he wrote down the story and put it on the Wei Shen website. By the way, you can get that. You can go to the Wei Shen website and read all kinds of stories there. And his story will be there. But he said the reason you can't tell, he said there are still a lot of people that are very sensitive in China about what happened in the Cultural Revolution. And he was, when his grandson sent me the first message by email, he sent me a picture of a duffel bag that said US on it, and it seemed like there was something else. He said all my valuables, including the piece of silk that was embroidered with the rescue scene, taken from him, he never got those back. So he didn't want that to be said for fear, but I made such a fuss. I made such a fuss about him that I think he's been given some hero award in China, which made me very, very happy.
So I wanted to ask you, your brothers and sisters were in camp with you?
Yeah, all of us,
Except the
All
one.
but one.
except the little one.
They all survived.
Yeah.
And they're still living?
No, my sister died of lupus about, let's see, she was 22 when she died of lupus, so she only lived about 5 years. My oldest brother became a missionary to China and spent his entire career in China and among the Chinese.
You still living?
No, he died, he as a missionary going around in Asia, the water is foul most of the places. You don't dare drink you don't drink water, period, unless it's been boiled, and he caught hepatitis and he died from that. My brother John,
John?
he's a surgeon in Ohio, he's the one that won the fly catching competition. And my little brother Bert is alive and well in Dallas, Texas, but it's like he's a different family. You can understand, he had a different experience.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean we don't love each other, it's just that he did not have that experience.
What was the experience of your parents?
The experience of our parents? Oh, well, that's a whole nother time, you have to invite me back to tell that story. Now, that was amazing, because my mother was she just almost lost it. She was for sure gonna lose it when she heard that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor and that now her children are gonna be in the hands of the Japanese. You can imagine, because they all the missionaries knew about the rape of Nanking. That was, everybody knew about that. I mean, the atrocities, there's a huge museum in China. I couldn't even go to that museum last summer when I was there. And I was close to it. I could not go and see that. It was too horrendous what was done there by the Japanese. And
Were you able to communicate with your parents while you were in China?
very little, very little. we were limited in the number of letters we were permitted to write. They gave us a piece of paper that we had to print in block capitals, 100 words. And I think it was like once a month. But there was only one interpreter for 1,500 prisoners in the camp. So that most of the letters did not go out until the end of the war. Then parents were flooded with letters from their children. But it was an amazing thing how my dad had set up when he heard the war was over. How most of the children's parents had returned to England, Australia, the United States, whatever. But my parents were among the people that had stayed in China. They had escaped far, far to the interior of China. In some respects, they had a rougher time during the war than we had because they underwent horrendous bombings as Japanese were trying to soften up the territory where my parents had escaped to and opened up a Bible school in the far northwest of China. And I've heard my mother tell the story of this little fellow when he was born. They'd hear the air raid siren, and when they heard the air raid siren, she said, I made a flour bag was made out of cloth. She said, I took a flour bag and cut the corner of this one and this one, put the baby in with his legs coming out of each little hole, and strapped him across my shoulders. And she said, I'd get on my bicycle and head outside of the city, figuring they would probably not bomb outside the city. And she said, I didn't want him to have his nerves shattered by being in the midst of bombings. Bombings, that's, well, of course, you all know what happened in England with the bombings of Britain, with the Germans bombing England. But we did not have bombings, but the grown-ups had fear. There's no question about that.